Hello BookTube. Today for Tag Tuesday, I'm going to be doing the top 5 English novels tag. This tag was born from a conversation between Erica Carl Anderson and Sarah of Hardcover Hearts while Sarah was vacationing in the UK about a week or so ago. This conversation was weaponized by Hannah of Hannah's Books, and she's made it into a tag. So I will leave links to the birthing video, Hannah's weaponization, and also a link to Sarah's channel in the show notes down below. Now, when I think of the top 5 English novels, I tend to take a bit more of the 5 greatest all time, rather than breaking it down by genre or by favorites. So I was going to go with the top 5 English novels that are also my favorites. And as I got to thinking about that, I started to hear crickets, because I realized that, do I really have the breadth, the depth of reading in English fiction that really would argue for, or that I have a good base to say, okay, these are my top 5 favorite English novels that are like great. So then I just retreated and went, okay, well, maybe I could do a top 5 English novels that I'm going to read. And then I'm like, no, that's not going to work either, because if you watch my channel for any length of time, you will know that anytime I try to create a reading project of any sort, it usually falls apart in a mass of bales. So I'm going to go with my top 5 English novels that are my favorites. So my version is my favorites, although maybe in hindsight I could have gone with my top 5 favorite Agatha Christie novels and just left it at that. But anyway, so I'm just going to do my top 5 favorites. Although I do really want to read more widely in English fiction. I was an English lit major, but the focus tended to be more on American literature and American fiction than on British or English. So something I want to look more into, and also that my reading tastes don't naturally gravitate towards the canonical or the contemporary literary fiction. So once I started reading adult fiction around, I think it was about 11 or 12. It's about 5th grade, 6th grade in the US. I transitioned from middle grade fiction to adult fiction. There was no young adult for me. And so for the first few, my preteen and early mid-teen years, I was a huge mystery reader. And then from about 16, 17, I transitioned to science fiction and fantasy, which has been my favorite genre of fiction for the past 20 odd years. Keeping in mind that since 2020, me and fiction don't really have much of, I haven't gotten on with fiction the last few years. But for the 20 years up to then, my favorite genre, the genre that I most gravitated towards, was science fiction and fantasy. So, I mean, there was a brief period, like 17 to about 24, when I was in college, that I did have also primarily reading science fiction and fantasy, that I did I did spend quite a bit of time reading more canonical, more literary fiction. Some of that for class, some of it because I was an English lit major, and that was the thing to do. Is that at the time I thought these would be the books that I would be studying and researching and writing scholarly papers on, and not science fiction and fantasy, which I thought you really couldn't critically give that depth to. Of course, I was wrong, you can, but it's just at that time there was still the sort of the genre fictions by rote deserves to be in the garbage, no matter what popular culture I think it's the Journal of Popular Culture says. I mean, of course, that opinion was wrong then, and if there's any of it left, it's still wrong, but it's wrong then too. So anyway, BookTube, all of that wool gathering aside, let's get to my favorite English novels. So coming in at number 5 is The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins. This is one of the most major, one of the major early works of detective fiction. It's about a fabulous diamond that has religious significance in India that was plundered during the British conquest of the kingdom that had the Moonstone in its treasury, and how at the end of the person who stole the Moonstone's life, he left it to a niece as part of a petty revenge scheme beyond the grave. So the Moonstone is given to his niece for her birthday, and shortly after the party it is stolen. The police are called, and he slowly unravels what happened. Although that unraveling is sort of takes a back seat to the butler's attempt himself to figure out what happened, and so he and eventually the young lady's husband kind of collect a whole slew of documents, of reports, of diaries from a number of people who were there to sort of explain what happened. And it's a very fascinating novel that I really have enjoyed every time I've read it. Coming at number 4 is King Solomon's Mines by H. Rider Haggard. This is a novel of adventure. It is set in southern Africa, and it's about a British nobleman named... I'm completely blanking on his name. Okay, Sir Henry Curtis. It's like about a British nobleman, Sir Henry Curtis, and his friend, Captain Good, who come to Africa looking for Sir Henry's brother. To help find him, they approach Alan Quatermain, a hunter who has lived in southern Africa for decades. They kind of figure out that the brother has gone in search of King Solomon's Mines, this fabled diamond mine located further north. So the three go in search of the mines and hopefully find Sir Henry's brother. When they follow this map, they come across a lost world, a world that has yet to be discovered. And it's a very fascinating novel. I've read it a few times over the years, and I've really enjoyed it. It's while on the surface it's problematic. certainly for 2022. For the time, it was startlingly progressive. I mean, still problematic to me, but anyway. So number 4 is King Solomon's Mines. And number 3, which I don't have, is Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf, which I think so far everybody who's done this tag has done a Virginia Woolf novel somewhere on here. And Mrs. Dalloway, I remember being a very interesting, a very powerful novel when I read it. I did read it for a class about 16, 17 years ago, and maybe closer to 50, yeah, would have been that. Oh, anyway, it's about a young middle-aged woman who's basically a day in her life, and it's one of the few, I think, successful examples of stream of consciousness that I've read. I haven't had it for years, and I think I ought to go ahead and try to hunt down a new copy of it and reread it, because it's been forever since I've read it. Coming in at number 2 is A Pocket Full of Rye by Agatha Christie. I don't have an individual copy, so I'll use an omnibus of it. A Pocket Full of Rye is a Miss Marple novel. It's from the 50s. It's about a wealthy businessman named Rex Fortescue who one day when he goes to work after he calls for his tea, dies of poisoning, taxine poisoning to be precise. Shortly thereafter, the beautiful widow is murdered in the parlor, and the maid is murdered in the garden with a clothespin nipped to her nose. This last murder brings forth one very angry Miss Marple, and it is her figuring out the murder and what happened is just glorious. It is my personal favorite Agatha Christie novel. I've loved it ever since I first read it, and I periodically come back to it, and I love it even more. So, that was number 2. Coming in at number 1 is Perdido Street Station by China Mieville. This is a work of New Weird, probably the greatest work of New Weird. It's about a rogue scientist named Isaac who lives in the city of New Crobuzon. One day he is approached by Haggard, a Garuda, a birdman, who asks Grimnebulin to give him flight again. Haggard has had his wings amputated as part of a judicial punishment, and so Isaac sets about to try to figure out a way to give Haggard flight. So he gathers a number of flying things to try to figure out how to remake Haggard into being able to fly again. When he determines that this would be impossible or incredibly difficult, he goes back to his original sort of research, which is the creation of a machine that produces infinite energy. But just as Grimnebulin begins to clear out his the animals he's collected, one of these animals that he's collected, a little worm, little caterpillar with a very weird diet, turns into a monster. And that little monster goes and rescues its siblings, who were brought to New Crobuzon as part of a drug-making operation run by a crime lord who just so happens to have employed Isaac's girlfriend to produce a sculpture portrait of him. And things go from bad to worse. I read this novel in the first time in like late 2006, early 2007, and it blew me away. The style, just the images, just everything about Perdido Street Station blew me away. It completely overturned everything I thought you could do with writing fantasy, and how you can achieve a more literary style in writing fantasy than I'd previously read. So Perdido Street Station is my top English novel. So that was my contribution to the top 5 English novels. If you would like to do this tag, consider yourselves tagged. Excuse me, and I will see you tomorrow with a discussion video, perhaps about my 20 favorite books or about cookbooks, one of the two. So until then, BookTube, thank you, have a great afternoon, and stay safe.